Are these people entitled or just mean? Let's decide. How one bratty bridesmaid picked the wrong seamstress to mess with. Back when I was in high school, my little sister was really sick. She had a serious condition. That means lots of hospital stays, tons of meds, and non-stop doctor visits. My parents were juggling everything, and to help with the bills, my mom picked up a bunch of side hustles. One of them was sewing custom dresses for weddings. Bride gowns, bridesmaid dresses, you name it. She had two golden rules when it came to her sewing gigs. First, she always did your measurements herself. She would go on and on about how lying to look thinner would just screw up the fit. Second, final fittings had to be done at least 3 weeks before the wedding. That gave her a cushion in case my sister ended up in the hospital again and she had to scramble to finish things. This one bride came along who wanted her bridesmaids in pastel organza. Organza, if you don't know, is that super light, semi-transparent fabric that frays if you breathe too hard near it. Thank God you gave a description, because I think we all know I would have no idea what that means. The base of the dresses was white with pastel layers over it. The problem was there were more bridesmaids than pastel shades, so someone had to end up in tan. Awkward, but the bride didn't want to assign colors, so she said, first one to show up for measurements gets to choose. Cue the drama. One bridesmaid, let's call her the problem child, PC, lived a few hours away and flat out refused to come in for measurements. She claimed she was a size 6 and that should be good enough. Spoiler, bridal sizing is a whole different beast. Size 6 means nothing. My mom tried everything and finally agreed that PC could get measured by a local seamstress and send over the numbers. Fast forward to 3 weeks before the wedding. My sister was back in the ICU on a ventilator. My mom had to finish 7 dresses while constantly running back and forth to the hospital. Some amazing friends stepped up to help us with the kids, and somehow she made it work, barely. Meanwhile, PC refused to come in for a final fitting until 2 days before the wedding. Her exact words? Your mom clearly doesn't know how to size dresses properly. Yeah, I heard that while I was sorting beads in the corner, trying not to chuck one at her. My mom begged one of her friends to stay with my sister all day so she could fit and finish this nightmare dress. And of course, PC showed up 2 hours late. When she saw the tan dress, she absolutely lost it. I was gonna say, we're putting her in the tan dress, right? Like, she's the one who's getting the tan color. Full on tantrum, screaming that my mom must have given her the ugly color on purpose. She demanded another girl trade dresses and that my mom redo both to swap the colors. That would have been 20+ hours of work. My mom straight up laughed and said, nope. The bride eventually showed up and shut that down very fast. She reminded PC that the colors were picked on first come basis and that tan was literally the only one left when she sent in her measurements. Finally, PC tried the dress on. Surprise, surprise, it didn't zip. Turns out she had edited all her measurements to make herself look smaller. Shaved off 1 to 2 inches here or there. Quote, because she didn't trust a jealous seamstress to get them right. I don't know what she has against this seamstress, but at that point, my mom had had enough. She told PC the dress would need major adjustments. She would have to widen the base and basically make a new top layer from scratch. So she doubled the price. PC whined, the bride stepped in, and eventually PC agreed to pay. Mom told them to come back in 5 hours and then kicked them out. The second version of the dress fits like a glove. PC grudgingly paid the full price and left without another word. A few weeks later, my sister... No. A few weeks later, my sister passed away. I'm so sorry. After that, my mom swore off wedding dresses for good. She's only made one since, and that was as a favor to the same friend who sat by my sister's bedside while she was dealing with that nightmare bridesmaid. I can't imagine dealing with a person like this when your child is in the ICU on a ventilator. Bless her. Your mother is a literal angel on earth. Safe to say, I think that person was entitled and mean. Called the police over a parking spot. This is a thing with Karens. We see it all the time. So a few years ago, I briefly worked in a screen printing factory. It was located in a business plaza next to a bunch of other factories and whatnot. So the parking lot was shared by all the businesses. It was a decently sized parking lot. Even when it was full, there were still plenty of spaces. So anyway, at the time I was driving my mom's old car. I don't know why I said it like that. Wasn't the worst, but wasn't the best either. Just something to get to and from. One day during our lunch break, I tried to start my car and it was dead. I was irritated, but it didn't really affect anything. One of my coworkers lived near me, so she was able to give me a lift home. I didn't have anywhere else to be besides there and home, so I wasn't worried about being without a car for a day or two. I talked to my boss about leaving it there overnight till I could figure out a time to get it towed, and he had no problem with it. The next morning, my boss walks up to me and jokes that my car trouble is causing drama. Turns out, my car was parked in the spot that one of the employees at one of the neighboring businesses liked to park at. In his exact words, it was the guy's favorite spot. Don't ask me why. I've spent many sleepless nights wondering how or why someone could have a favorite parking spot. Like, please tell me the reasoning. I just like the way my car fits between the lines. I love the view of the building. I've heard of people who grow romantic attachments to buildings and vehicles, but never a parking spot. Just watch, we're gonna see that on My Strange Addiction. We're gonna see someone who wants to marry a parking spot. Maybe it's him. I felt bad about it because I like to respect people's feelings, but my boss told me not to worry about it, so I didn't. The guy worked at one of the businesses my boss didn't like, so he honestly found it all sort of funny. His main concern was not having to put up with the dude, so he just wanted me to get it taken care of before he whined anymore. It's also worth mentioning that this spot had no signs. It wasn't marked as reserved, had no names labeled on it, or a handicap spot. It wasn't even under a tree or anything near one of the building entrances. Literally, just a parking spot. There was nothing beneficial about parking your car there besides parking your effing car there. Then it comes time to go home. We all clock out and people are crowded around the windows. There's about 3 or 4 cop cars outside and one guy frantically talking to one of the officers. We're here thinking someone got hurt or robbed, you know, something terrible for a bunch of cops to show up and block all our cars in. The bystander effect was in full effect. But nope, parking spot dude was so upset about not being able to park his car in his beloved spot for one day, barely 12 hours, that he called the police and reported my vehicle as suspicious and was trying to have it impounded. I don't understand. It's not every day where I feel bad for police officers, but man, the cop that he was whining to looked beyond his crap. He looked like an extremely annoyed father dealing with an unruly toddler, which was even funnier because he looked about half the parking spot guy's age. So I walk up and the dude immediately points at me and goes, "That's him! That's his car!" Acting like I was America's Most Wanted. And I'm gonna be honest, I got a little nervous. I have priors. Cops don't entirely like me. I don't entirely like having to talk to cops. And now some man Karen is pointing me out to a group of officers. But the cop casually walks up to me and just asks me the standard questions. I showed him my license, proving the car was mine and it's legit and all that, and explained how the battery's dead and was just waiting for a good time to have it towed. He was chill as hell with me, honestly. Well, parking spot dude was not pleased with the cop's chillness. In fact, he was quite offended. He's hovering around trying to listen in on our conversation. I don't know exactly what he was hoping would happen, but he slowly realized that it was going to be the exact opposite of his wishes. He butts in going, "Aren't you gonna give him a ticket? Can't he be arrested for this?" just desperately trying to take control of the situation and find some way to make my life miserable. And the cop just sighs and goes, "Sir, it's not illegal to have a dead battery or to simply park there even if your car was working." Anne was about to give a lecture on what's illegal before parking spot dude just goes full blown Karen mode. That's a mode that we don't want to be around. Stamping his feet, screeching about police being corrupt bastards. You know, the usual grief from someone not getting their way. We all just stood there watching this grown man throw a tantrum, and he finally realizes that nobody cares about him and his precious parking spot, so he just storms off back into the building. I'm sure all of his coworkers got to hear all about it. The cops eventually leave, and they don't even write down my info or anything. It was obvious from the get-go that they didn't give a shite about me and my car. They pulled up expecting a big bust, and all they got was a kid with car trouble and a toddler trapped in an old man's body. I was kind of disappointed they didn't arrest him or give him a fine, but you can't have everything. As relieved as I was super embarrassed to have all that happen in front of everyone, but they were all just blown away by how the dude was acting. I was hoping to have my car dealt with that day since it was close to the weekend, but out of spite, I kept it there another day or two. I later found out the dude ended up losing his job over the whole ordeal between getting the police involved and presumably making it everyone else's problem. I could only imagine how done they all were with him. He seemed like a joy to be around. My boss thought it was the funniest stuff ever and never lived it down. He loved to joke about getting me arrested for coming in late because of course he did. Bosses have the same sense of humor as dads. I eventually left that job for bigger and better things and got a car that doesn't spontaneously crap out on me. But man, I'll never forget about parking spot dude and the massive injustice he suffered because of me. I'm sure he's doing well, if even still alive. We will never know. The mystery of parking spot dude. Speaking of cars breaking down, mine. She's gone. Yeah, she broke down. I came to my hometown for a wedding. She broke down 3 days in a row. I had to get 2 tow trucks to take her to the shop. I drive very old cars. Okay, your girl is a used car, cheap, girly, and I need a new car. She's a goner. Perfect time on that note of getting a new car because mine decided to fail me. Cheers. Hop on hydration station. This looks like coffee, it's water. I just put it because it keeps it nice and cold in here. Cheers. Old woman physically grabs teenage me while at dinner with my family, demanding me, and me specifically, to get off my phone and talk to my family, who were all also on devices. Interesting. Anyways, pre-COVID, when I was either 16 or 17, I started going on university tours with my family to try and decide where I might want to go for secondary school. My parents are loving, but often smothering, on top of being stereotypical anxious tourists who need to see a bit of everything when we go somewhere, and these trips almost invariably meant me, my 12 to 13-year-old sibling, and my parents were completely separated for 5 days to over a week if it wasn't a simple road trip. Not a single thing would happen on these trips that the whole group didn't experience unless it was a work call for my mother. She works in healthcare and is often on call, even on vacation. For this particular trip, we were visiting the University of Michigan for several days of visitor orientation and specific department tours. The 5th day out of the 9-day trip had our planned events ending around 11 a.m. I love my parents, but am getting deeply tired of them by this point, as tends to happen to anxious, introverted teenagers unable to recharge their social battery after several days of time being glued to the hip of 2 people who do not travel well, despite what they otherwise believe. My poor sibling is doing worse, but is able to fade into the background because they aren't the focus of the trip and have always been quiet, so didn't need to speak. Miraculously to me, it looks like my parents are also actually starting to feel the drain because when we're free for the afternoon, they deliberately chose to visit a quiet suburb of Ann Arbor to drive around with us and get lunch, picking an out-of-the-way diner to try. No one talks on the drive, just keeps to themselves. Even once we get into the diner, everything settles into a booth near the window, and after getting drinks, relaxes into a comfortable silence. We settle into what is essentially group parallel play at the table. Nothing is said because there's nothing really to say other than a brief discussion on what we might order. My dad and I are on our phones, my sibling has their 3DS out, and my mom is working on her tablet. It's all we have to distract ourselves from the hunger pains after 30 minutes passes after we place our orders and nothing comes out. Behind our booth and me, there's another separate booth with the only other people in the diner besides the waitress and the cook. Sitting in it are 3 older folks, 2 women and a man. I barely pay them any mind as we enter and get settled in. As far as I'm aware, there is no need for me to. In fact, they mattered so to me that their chatter was utterly indistinct to my tired brain, and I couldn't even say any of their features off the top of my head other than a blurry mix of white and gray hair. Except for one of the women. I didn't register at all when she got up, whether it was to go use the restroom, and this all happened after she came back, or if she got out of her booth specifically to do this, but believe me, I noticed when an iron grip of bony fingers suddenly wrapped themselves around my wrist and a hot pink pant blazer and aggressively bright psychedelic skirt appeared in my peripheral next to me. Why does this sound like something I would wear? Not the point of the story, but I'm like, oh, fire outfit. You shouldn't be on your phone at the table. Have some manners and talk to your family. She had this sickeningly sweet voice going on, like she was a grandmother doing me a favor by publicly scolding me and not the 3 other people at the table for doing something my parents clearly didn't have a problem with. And it was very clearly directed at me and only me because she was staring me down like a hawk. The chatter behind in the other booth has stopped, and my family all currently have their attention on me as I try to pull my hand away and tell her very specifically to don't put your hands on me. My parents do nothing, except sit and stare as she grips tighter and continues insisting on me turning off my phone until I grab her wrist with my other free hand and I yank her off, raising my voice. At this point, anger is for once overriding social anxiety for me because I can't believe an actual stranger is doing this and my parents aren't reacting. I was a young woman. If she had been a man, my dad would have put her on the floor the second she grabbed me. Do not grab me and give me orders like you know me. She opens her mouth, but my dad finally speaks up at this time. You know what? She's right. Let's put our things away and eat together like a family. Maybe after we tell her to not touch my kids. I'm not even a mom, but let me tell ya, if I see anyone putting their hands on my children, I don't care how old they are. Who are you? Oh, I would throw hands. To say I was pissed would have been an understatement. I am normally incredibly conflicted at this point in my life, especially when it comes to my parents, because it's almost always more trouble than it's worth. But at this moment, I am tired, I am starving, and I am angry. Any social anxiety I would normally experience in this scenario is out the window, and I decide in that moment that if they aren't going to stand up for me after a random stranger breaks our comfortable silence, then I was going to make things uncomfortable. The old woman is back in her booth as I turn my phone off, put it face down on the table, and I make some kind of face that my sibling said deeply unsettled them years after the fact. All I can remember is very specifically and as evenly and loudly as I could respond, okay, you want to talk? Fine, let's talk. So everyone should put their things away, right? What do you want to talk about? One by one, everyone puts their things away, my dad being first and my mom having to be prompted by both my dad and I to do so at last. Nobody has anything to say. Mind you, because there is nothing to say or discuss. We haven't seen a single thing the others haven't in a week. I don't remember specifics of the rest of the meal other than the food takes another 20 minutes or so to come out. So we're all starving, and I continue to try and prompt conversation with the only questions we haven't asked. The most generic stuff like how someone's coffee is, what people think of the weather, the plane ride, and the like. They add nothing. My parents won't look me in the eyes or even at each other. My mom tries to get her phone out to check a work email, and I have to remind her that we are having a meal without electronics. I have never seen her eye twitch the way it did as she put her phone back and haven't again since. She didn't say anything else. Things don't improve when the food comes, other than that there's an excuse to not be actively talking, though I continue to ask about the food. How was that bite? Can you imagine? Curiously, the booth behind us stayed silent except to ask for more coffee. Didn't hear a peep until we left, nor did I look back to see why all their happy conversation suddenly stopped because I wasn't going to give the old witch the satisfaction of recognizing her. I'm not going to lie, there isn't a massively satisfying ending to this. When we got back to our hotel, my parents went acting like nothing ever happened. I did not receive an apology from them or the old Karen. All right, parents, I need if this is happening to your teen, what are you doing? Are you saying something? Like, you can say that without putting your hands on my kid. I don't understand. What am I missing? Maybe they're missing something. I need to be paid for your work. I'm a lawyer, and a while back, a not close friend, who's also a lawyer, asked for help with a small claims lawyer where she was suing another lawyer for not paying her referral fees. I do litigation and she doesn't, so she needed some guidance and proofreading. I agreed, and I didn't expect any payment since it wouldn't take long and she needed help. I will mention that she's in a much better financial position than myself, as I recently got divorced and supporting 2 young kids, and she had only herself and her legal practice. It soon became clear that she didn't want proofreading, however, full drafting. Her draft was about a half sentence long. She had obviously done no research, had not looked up the statutes she would need, and couldn't even explain her case in words except for over the phone. This was more than I anticipated, and it took me away from paying for work that my family needs. But I figured I would get through it and maybe she would refer clients to me in the future. It took me around 3 hours, and she thanked me. She mentioned asking the judge to award her attorney fees. This is where the other side pays her legal bills if she wins. And wouldn't that be great if we got paid for my work? I said, yeah, that would be great, especially since this was much more of a project than I anticipated. About a week later, I got an urgent call. She won her case for the full amount, around $7,000 to $8,000, and the judge awarded her attorney fees. She just needs to submit my invoice by the end of day so the judge could include the amount in his order. I told her that is great, and I'll put together an invoice as soon as I get through an urgent project from my boss. I had to create an invoice from scratch because I don't use any of them at my firm. A couple hours later, I sent it to her. She thanked me, but said she already used one from her other friend because he had it ready and she wasn't sure that I would have it on time. I found this a little odd since he didn't do the work and she was knowingly submitting a false document to the judge, but I gave her the benefit of the doubt that it was for good purpose, equals paying me. Nope, she kept the money. She expressed deep thanks, however, to both me and the friend who created the invoice for our help. I'm sorry, what help did the other person provide? Making an invoice for someone else's work? Let me do that with my eyes closed. She clearly thought I would find as much poetic justice as she did in the fact that the deadbeat lawyer who originally refused to pay her fee had now had to pay back both her own fees and my fees, both of which she kept. There's definitely something ironic here, but not in the way she thinks. And no, she never sent me any referrals after that. You know, sometimes life is unfair, and when you do good things, you're like, I'm gonna do someone a favor out of the goodness of my heart, and then they take a fat dump on you. Like, I was just being nice. Let me know your thoughts, you guys. I'll see you in the comment section. Stay classy out there. Stay sassy.